Okay, you are welcome to this panel, second panel on the Soyinka. Being neither here nor there, continuity and discontinuity in Wole Soyinka's work, and key, organized by Center for Wole Soyinka Studies, University of Abuja. We already have two of our panelists, one on site and then we have one online. So the panel is supposed to have started by 9:15, and I think the students who are here in the panel, as many will be joining us online, we will be accommodating them, as many will be joining on site, we will also be accommodating them. So we already have Mr. Discontinuity here present, and then we have Mr. Latif online. So we start with Mr. Discontinuity. I think what we will do is that you make your presentation within 10 minutes. And the same we have about team, we can video about 15 minutes, and then we also take Mr. Latif. We will also have about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we take question and answer after the presentations. Okay, so you are welcome on board, Mr. Allison.
Yeah, thank you so much. You can just give me some minutes to send my slides.
Okay.
So can I not share this flash?
It's Mr. Latif is here. Come on. Otherwise, asking you also share your slide in the end to show it. Okay, so you can go on to the next one.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adewale Adesanmi from Obafemi Awolowo University, and I'm here to present a paper on the topic, which is Here and There, a stylistic deconstruction of selected Wole Soyinka's works. So the panel that I'm presenting in is actually continuity and discontinuity in Wole Soyinka's work. So I'm going to go straight into it, and we are going to begin with the first slide, which is the abstract. So basically what I try to do in this work is that I try to look at some elements that are present in Wole Soyinka's work, notably the significant stylistic marker that actually plays into the fact that Wole Soyinka is an hybrid writer, not necessarily a Nigerian writer or an English writer. His works portrays a sense of balance, whereby his work is rooted both in the African context and then in the European context. While it is true that Wole Soyinka has works in the three genres of literature: drama, prose, and poetry, it is impossible for me to study all of his works. That is why for this research, I'm focusing my attention on his poetry. And the poems I'm going to be looking into are just three, and they are Abiku, and then the second one is Apotheosis of Sergeant Mastado, and the third poetry that I'm going to look into is Telephone Conversation. In these three poetry of Wole Soyinka, what I have tried to do is that I have tried to look at some elements, linguistic elements, as well as literary elements that portrays his presence, both in the African ideology and then in the English ideology that portrays him as an hybrid writer. Please, next slide. So the introduction to this work actually looks at how Wole Soyinka has been able to negotiate meaning between the present and then the past, between modernity and tradition, as it is present in the works that have been selected for this essay. So we are going to look at some figurative language, the narrative perspective, the cohesion that Wole Soyinka has deployed in this work that plays to the tune of continuity of what was in the past and what is in the present, notably in the element of tradition and in the element of modernity. We are going to look at some irony that are contained in his work, in the overall work, and then in specific levels of analysis as we have it in this work. So if you look at this, the third paragraph in literature, I note that this paper examines the stylistic peculiarities and thematic structures that characterize Wole Soyinka's poetry, focusing on three of his most compelling works: Abiku, The Apotheosis of Sergeant Mastado, and Telephone Conversation, anchored on the panel theme being neither here nor there, continuity and discontinuity in Wole Soyinka's work. So this analysis interrogates Soyinka's linguistic dexterity, symbolic complexity, and cultural intertextuality. So focusing on his shifting registered, layered irony, and hybrid language use, we have how his work has project a stylistic tension that is rooted notably in displacement, tradition, and modernity. Please, next slide. Now, the background to this work actually stems from the fact that the personality of Wole Soyinka himself as not only as a writer, but as a person, it's actually quite interestingly, and it is actually stylistic in nature. And to demonstrate this, I argued on the fact that Wole Soyinka's aspect of his life in the form of the religion he was born to and the religion he practices, on the fact that he is his identity as a personality. I mean, he was someone who describes himself as an Ijegba man, not an Ijebu man, and not as an Egba man. We have a stylistic element of blending there. Actually, it is a linguistic element, which connotes that in the Yoruba tradition, the child is necessarily seen as being a member of the father's, should I say tribe, or should I say ethnic group. His father is actually an Ijebu man, and I think his mother is an Egba man. But Wole Soyinka blends these two things. He does not want to identify with one while neglecting the one. So he is neither here and he's neither there. Instead, he has been able to hybridize his identity. And on the third element that I note about is, we have talked about the religion, I've talked about his personal identity. And then the third one that I focused on is on the fact of his workings. He does not focus his works in the African realm alone. He actually demonstrates how he has been enriched by his travels. I mean, this man that has spent a large part of his work, his life in the UK. So his work has been hybridized. I mean, he's a native African writer, and there are elements that demonstrate this in his work. If you look at Lion and the Jew, this is very, very well represented. Death and the King Osman, this is very well represented. And these are things that actually showcases Wole Soyinka not only as a native writer. I mean, if you are to compare Wole Soyinka's work to that of Chinua Achebe, let's say Things Fall Apart. Achebe centers his work in that text, majorly in the African context. But with the work of Wole Soyinka, especially the poetry that we have selected, not only does it demonstrate his African sense, but it also demonstrates the influence of the Western world where he has spent a large part of his life. Next. So the statement for the problem of this research is that we are basically trying to find some stylistic tools that demonstrate and then that contributes to the fact that issue of post-coloniality does not only rest in African text alone. It actually forms a sort of hybridity. I mean, how the writer interprets and works with the influences that they have actually been in contact with. In the work of Wole Soyinka, for example, we are going to find how elements of his time, as has been said more than once by me, how his influence has been seen both in the African context and in the Western world, notably in the English culture. Please, next slide, please. So please, next slide. So yes, in this work, we are going to be focusing on some special terms. And then for those that are on this session that are not really that into the linguistic part, we are going to be looking into the linguistic stylistics, literary text, the construction, cultural hybridity, and poetry. And with linguistic stylistics, it is actually a form of analytical tool, which tries to look at evidence, empirical evidence, and not just intuition in the work of an author to try and ground their works in the linguistic work to show not only what they are trying to connote in their thoughts as read by the reader, but actually evidences that actually support this. This is the reason why I've decided to use linguistic stylistics. And then literary text, as used by me in this work, actually we focus on the three poetry: Abiku, the Hypothesis of Sergeant Bastado, and Telephone Conversation. Now, the construction is actually literary terms that was actually popularized by Jacques Derrida in post-structuralism. And it actually has to do with reading a text against itself, where you read a text to show that the meaning that is being seen by many is actually not the meaning that can only be found in it. And in this work, I try to do that. Then we have cultural hybridity, the unification of two cultural backgrounds as used by a writer. Then poetry, which is basically the form of literature that's written in line and stanzas. Please, next. So to actually carry out this essay, I focus on linguistic stylistics, as I've already said, the construction, and I try to use checklists, which was postulated by Leach and Short in their book, Style in Fiction in 2007. Leach and Short actually give us a list of what we can look for in a literary text to try and find linguistic evidence, and part of which include grammatical level, lexical level, and every other thing. And in this essay, in this research, I've tried to follow the checklist as postulated by Leach and Short to try and find the hybridity that I seek, and then to prove that Wole Soyinka's work is neither focused on the African context, but rather it is a pendulum that oscillates between being here and being there. Please, next slide. Now, focusing on Abiku. Abiku, as a poetry of Wole Soyinka, actually demonstrates the essence of a child that is neither alive and that is neither dead. The child comes and goes, transposing his position, either in the world of the living or in the world of the dead. In the synopsis for this poem that I wrote, I said, the poem Abiku is grounded in Yoruba cosmology. It explores the spirit-child myth of a child who dies and returns repeatedly to torment its parents, notably the mother. The poem explores dense imagery, traditional symbols, and syntactic compression to mirror the cyclical temporality of Yoruba metaphysics. So when we read this poem, Abiku, you are going to find the general meaning that is actually correspond to it by people is that Abiku by Wole Soyinka is trying to demonstrate one of the most controversial claim by the Yoruba people, that it's quite possible for a child to be born and the same child to die and to return. This oscillating between the living and the dead is something that is not really readily accepted by readers in the Western world. But Wole Soyinka, being a notable writer, taking up on this topic and writing it into poetry, demonstrates that truly this concept of Abiku is something that is not only living in the world of ideology, but it's actually something that is actually true. If we should examine, please, next slide. If we should examine the poem itself in a particular stanza, Wole Soyinka demonstrates in that line whereby he says that I am the squirrel teeth, cracked the secret of, it says, I am the squirrel's teeth, crack the secret of the palm kernel. Now, in ordinary reading of this, it might seem like Abiku is trying to show its power, how has been able to decide its own fate without considering that of the parent. But upon closer inspection, if we should consider this, we see that line, that syntactic line that states that Abiku, I am the squirrel teeth that crack the palm kernel. It is actually rooted in Yoruba metaphysics, or should I say Yoruba cosmology. Because if we should look at the Yoruba Ifa corpus, there is a saying, or should I say, it is rooted in Orumila's story, whereby Orumila, while he was alive, he was not content with the dwellings or doings of humans. So Orumila decides to leave the world and transcend to the heaven spirit, to go to heaven. But his disciples were concerned that the work that has already started, that they will not be able to continue it. And as a solution, Orumila gave his disciples, he gave them divination tools. And central to this divination tool is the Ikin. And the Ikin, when it is translated into English, that is what we have, palm kernel. So the palm kernel, as it is demonstrated in that poetry, the Ikin, it goes further. When the disciples begin to use this Ikin in their divination to provide solutions to people's problems, we find out that there's a particular problem with this divination too. While the Ikin is powerful in divination, it is still an object, a physical object, and it is an object that is delighted by squirrels. Now, if you should take a palm kernel, you see how strong, how hard it is. It is not easy to break it with your bare hand, but an animal like a squirrel is able to pick up the Ikin, break into it, and devour the seed that is inside. So in that poetry, where Wole Soyinka takes the stance, or where the Abiku says, I am the squirrel that breaks the secret of the palm kernel, it is actually rooted deeply. While the poem is written in the English language, the meaning in it might be lost to many readers, and they might not get the connotative meaning that is actually rooted in Yoruba cosmology. With this single line in that poem, I believe that it shows that Wole Soyinka does not write just only to explain his position on a particular ideology or a particular happening in the Yoruba tradition. Wole Soyinka shows himself to be a writer or a poet that is deep in the Yoruba cosmology and the Yoruba traditional religion. There are other elements that are present in this poem, but for the sake of my presentation, I would like to move forward to take another analysis of the second poem. I will come back to that. Next slide. In the poem, next slide. In the poem, the second poetry that I'm going to look into, which basically is the apotheosis of Sergeant Master Do. This poetry is actually a very interesting poem because the poetry begins with apotheosis, which actually connotes a religious hymn song that is usually sung in the Christian setting. So when Wole Soyinka wrote apotheosis of Sergeant Master Do, one would be deceived to, at the surface level, one would be deceived to think that this poem is actually a praise, or it is actually a contribution to the general or positive working of Master Do. But upon closer look, we find out that this is not the truth. The poem is actually written as a satire of the former Liberian military president who came into power quite at a very young age to the post of president. In the poem, Wole Soyinka demonstrates that while the country burns, while the country deteriorates from the iron fist with which the sergeant master rules the country, the master sergeant himself believes himself to be a personality that is unassailable, as demonstrated in the poem. Please, next slide. Especially in the last stanza, where Wole Soyinka wrote that until the people's fiesta, a blood-red steamer in Monrovia skies, a lamppost and the swinging redeemer. Now, this part of that poem demonstrates his contribution to the happenings in the African countries. Wole Soyinka, as we know him, is a Nigerian writer, is a Nigerian poet, is a Nigerian dramatist, and most of his work centers on Nigerian issues. But in this poem, Wole Soyinka takes the position of not just being a critic to the Nigerian government. He demonstrates that his views, his criticism of injustice is not limited only to the Nigerian country, but into the far African countries. Liberia is a country that is actually not the birthplace of Wole Soyinka. But Wole Soyinka was able to understand the happenings, the ways, the political instability, and then the way the leader, the president, the military president at that time, how he came into the power, which was actually through a very bloody coup. And then how he decides to hold on to power by maintaining that same level of high-handedness. In this poem, Wole Soyinka, in that last stanza, where we are until the people's fiesta as used in that particular stanza, demonstrates another religious element. Fiestas means a celebration, a religious celebration that is held rather in the Christian faith. Now, when Soyinka demonstrates that until the people's fiesta, a blood-red streamer in Moravian skies, he actually uses this line to demonstrate that the people's fiesta in this context does not actually mean religious celebration, which is actually deconstructing the meaning of fiesta in this line. For him, the people's fiesta here simply means when the people are going to take back the power from the master sergeant that has came into the power, and the way they are going to take the power is going to be the same way he came into power. That's why we have there a blood-red streamer. The lexical word blood there does not just connote the element that flows in people's skin, in people's vein. It actually connotes a system that has been normalized in Liberia back then for a person to get into power. And this poem not only demonstrates that, or should I say predicts that, because later in the history of Liberia, we actually saw that Master Sergeant Doe, as high-handed as how serious he was, he actually came to a very bloody end as well in the hands of a fellow military officer. So by focusing on elements here, we demonstrate that Soyinka does not only fixes himself here in the Nigerian society. He is neither here, he is neither there. His work is demonstrate a his work actually concentrates on the happenings that are present in the world, whether being in Nigeria or being over there. And then lastly, the poem Telephone Conversation also demonstrates something similar about identity, and then about a person's need to remember where they come from. Because you are over there does not mean you should forget that you are originally from here. Please, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Now, in that poem, Telephone Conversation, I draw some linguistic elements, which is in the syntactic level. I hate a wasted journey. I am African. Whereby the respondent, the poetic persona, was asking him, how dark? I had not misled. Are you light or very dark? And at the end of it, Wole Soyinka answers, I choose West African sepia. So basically, this poem also connotes that just because you are trying to find better, greener pastures does not mean you should forget where you are. And the fact that you are over there does not mean that you are neither of here. Instead, if you are going to find a balance or new identity, it should be an hybridity of the two. Now, the works of Wole Soyinka, as demonstrated in my essay, shows Wole Soyinka to be a person who values not only the African culture, the African religion, and the African identity with which he comes from. He has been able to demonstrate that he has refused to be confined to the realm of being an African writer. He has refused to be confined to be an English writer, but instead, his position is being in between. And I believe that for us in this current situation, in the current age and time, it's the best approach with which we can take our position as well is to be a person in the middle. There's nothing bad in being a modern man. There's nothing bad in being a traditional man. But instead, going forward, the right approach to actually create the new future would be to be an hybrid person, combining tradition with modernity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know, do we have any presenter online or present to start from me? Anybody on the panel who is there? Anybody online? Okay, so since you don't have anybody online, somebody joined the other time and went for the hope to join again to make their presentation. But we are listening to Mr. Addition, I do this presentation on here and there. stylistic is constructed or selected roles of Soyinka. Please, can we encourage student education, comments, suggestions, guide, and all those things? The floor is open. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Soyinka. I want to sincerely commend the professor for the effort put into the research and also for being an undergraduate student in the form of the university. Then, what I need to come forward to make this presentation. So, I give it to you for
Thank you.
Right path. But I must say that in slides, there's a reason why it is called purpose. So we will get back to controls from this, and we discuss and ways to be improved. So,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I like to say in this spread really works.
That breaks the front.
Yeah. Your take it to level levels. Very, very. I use that again, chat. When you have a situation like chat, can say a big task to convey kind of way. And that's what position that's trying to observe the battle. That's the expression. That's it. We are thinking possibility on like opponent this level in nation. That's when you was trying to fast. I is like take that one to the yeah, people there has to see. Fine, it's not the rare I look at it. But we can understand what it is within our cultural environment. The two local and I knew that was in a whole compound. About 20 to close to 10 weeks. And that's what I do for well, that was but I was possible. And was a big well honest. Who went this one go there. And there I said that. But we didn't kind of thinking. We didn't have a good way to also do this now. What happened? We know that in our office is or in only our African thinking in our it's something that is easy. But if you say you know this time. The actually good and say the job. And mass. Nothing mass and so on. And we look back time. The child died. There was some laceration. I want to be honest. That when the mother gave back to my one, yeah, with everything is gone. What he did that, and would say that it was God, it's rejected in the word of spirit, the word you could talk to man, you can do that. So we know all this thing about people on suffering. Yeah, which they are somebody think that for us, they are different things that they have. I don't know how you relate to it in your analysis of the God.
What I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to deconstruct well the cultural setting. That is the explanation that's generally given to this. I do not contest or I do not deny that I think something, but I'm trying to look at new interpretations whereby I read the line, then I try to form new understanding. The old interpretation is valid, it is very valid, very true from the cultural setting. But I believe that it can also be reinterpreted from another, and so I don't see that's part of the
You are saying that here or there.
yes.
I can say that if this oil is taken out of African countries, is that helps me that other people will be, and then there's
Yes, I believe that's what the whole essence of leader response here.
Well, I think part of what the construction is actually saying is that there is really deferred.
Yes.
Okay, so there is actually no concrete meaning of them. So externally deferred, we consider and we look from what is called, there is actually no signified here now, because that's signification. Signifying and signifying. Okay, so I think in that sense, we really becomes local pendant to that thing we are going to really depending on the change. And I was not anywhere just also in this discussion now. I think sometimes when we read as a director was there, when we read the thing, we read the maps. There's the context in some maps. We look at the inside, we are convinced that what should be used to you and not what you need to me. What are they in my place might not be simply really to go. So that's why when I say neither here or there. So that's why I thought to say, please, I want to follow it. Because it's neither here or there. That's why when I heard that you say you are because you tell me you see training policy. I'm not the cover is free. Unlike we did that, and so when the human mentioned that these are not that I feel so overwhelmed by the examination of come forward in this platform and make a presentation plannings and to engage those friends with boldness and with courage and to make known his own view of them. I think he has really done well for himself. And I can only wish him success, especially in continuity and not deception.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I don't know if we have time. You would like to give comments?
Comment I wanted to make.
Okay, but then I will see what also engage some of the things he said. Now, I'll come back to what you mean by displacement. When you were talking about displacement in your analysis, can you what is it in those poems that Soyinka displaces the displaced and what to later was there any replacement or is there any replacement?
So in which
How do you talk about displacement?
yes, that's correct. That is correct. In movement, yes.
What is all that mean? Okay. Yes. So, well, anyway, I think generally, when we are dealing with construction, and we will take this further, especially the delimitation of construction, because ultimately there must always be meaning.
Yes.
Because if you have come here with no meaning, especially to your paper and your presentation, then you won't have anything to engage. So when we then say that ultimately meaning is part, what do you mean? And what is the implication of that for literary decision or even for communal conversations? are we not signposting or putting ourselves in a situation where we get into trouble, where everybody can then go with their own means? Is that not going to create chaos? So am I then at liberty to just create any meaning from a particular term because we have said that meaning is deferred and that there is so one meaning?
Actually, there's particular reason why I did not use the construction alone for this paper, whereby I'm buying it with statistics. Statistics is basically about interpretation with evidence. Why the construction might say a particular word or a particular ideology differs from itself, and then we have a repertoire of meaning that can be generated from it. Statistics try to find evidences that support a particular meaning that I am giving to that.
So don't think that in that case, then you need to actually say one theory so that you don't contradict yourself in the same paper. Because if you are using a theory that claims that there is meaning and that this is meaning, then you are also combining it with the theory that says that meaning is open-ended and is reversed. Then you'll be contradicting yourself. So I think it is then better to just stick to one particular theory in this case. Just think with statistics, stick with statistics. If you want to go by way of the construction, then go by way of, because there are still so many things to say in the construction.
Yes.
We talked about how signs in binary opposition eliminate the other sign to privilege the self. So we are not even gotten to a point where we talk about privilege, which sign privileges itself over another sign in binary opposition. And then how it's a sign eliminated for the other sign to create meaning, a dominant meaning. Okay, so all those ones you are not even going into them. You see them in the paper. So I think it's better so I think it will probably be better if you stay with stylists. You know, so that all the next villages
I want to ask the comment first myself. If we are again shops, we are against not to have any business. So I don't want to say that from another perspective, all the construction of these things, you will have you will sell this, but I've needed a new financial, but as we are doing work, you know, that way, this is we thought we be out to the meaning of this place is with the construction, not other possible move that are where to see it, rather than knowing that what we ask to, it's mainly that the parent of activity and also the same in their perspective. Not to just consider that I'm not rich, I'm just living. So I don't see that. Not for perspective, the hospital part, yes, that we need a very much. I know the example.
and then we also have to show that global center meaning, the center meaning that he is worked on. We have to show that this particular meaning is the meaning that everybody has seen and helped to, that I'm not turning it. People are not turning it. Okay, and after not turning it, these are the other meanings and the okay. So that is if you want to really do the conception. Do we have any other? But then, you know, maybe because of time, after the engaging the presentation of some against them, because those are points that I'm actually at least I'm familiar with the people and taking conversation. I've not seen the hypothesis of those, and I would like to get it for people so that I can use this for my own literary curiosity. But then, there are a lot of things in ability and telephone conversation. When the first line, you said the farm camel is safe, but I think the farm camel but I think the farm camel is the one from farm tools. the one from Aspen. You see, so what's the name for that one? It's not the arm tandem, the one that was start from campus.
If Johnny,
Yes.
if Royce actually was inside.
No, that's not the trainer. The king is different. You don't know the king is from another tree entirely. It's not from campus. Okay, so you also have to look at that again. Because the king must have a different name from Pantan. The Puro is the Pantan. The king is actually completely different. And in case they want to use for refined definition, it's a special food like this, always flat and straight. No, no, that one is not friendly. That one is for that one is sorry. Okay, so again, this is further research to understand the issue and be able to separate from farm country. Farm nuts. Okay, so you probably yes. And then it's not it should show the direct. Okay. No. Then I also think that your work will also benefit more as you have said, you work through the line more and then deal with different areas of meanings that this will offer you. Because at ordinary literary level, are people saying that I am the school that has the capacity, I'm trying to paraphrase now,
Yes.
to crack open the palm island. And mostly being arrogant, saying that look, I am transcendental. In fact, that was one of the reasons why he was boasting that all that they have done to him, holding down, all the charms, everything, that he has the power to render those things useless. And that in fact, it would not be stopped ultimately. That when it's time for him to go, he will go, and then when it's time for him to return, he will return. Okay, and by the time you begin to break with this the little side issues and the little doctrine, you see this arrogance and that character. And I think one of the reasons why some people have always said that at another layer of meaning that Soyinka was talking about military men who come and go in Nigerian politics at that time. That they have become a kind of a that the civilians don't have power over or don't have any way to address it or to stop them. Okay. So there are a lot of things in doing that. And then when we take telephone conversation, I don't think you can gradually see that it's an hybrid industry. So yeah, so now was actually talking about serious issue of racism and how the wife treats anybody that is black. And in that way, you read the lines, you see Soyinka trying to show that this black that is being seen as an identity, as being inferior, is actually an intellectual giant than the person that is looking at me as an inferior being. And you see that he was actually making a mess of the woman in that conversation. Making a mess of that woman. Depicting that woman, showing that woman as just an arrogant individual who does things by the honor of her state, then she's superior to anybody who is. So when he then said that West Africa, he's showing kind of West Africa.
Yes.
Okay, he is. So when he then says Sapien or whatever, he's just trying to show to that lady that look, you don't even know anything. you are so limited to your own environment, you don't have any experience. And that was the reason why you see that the lady became confused. I was trying to say, explain to me how that, very that, you should put it, because she's limited to what she knows with the race, with the culture.
Actually, it's because of the time, I time short. I note in that telephone conversation two elements that are actually forgotten, whereby I have the use of declarative sentence and then interrogative sentence. And then that's what said here. So for the woman, she was challenging showing past her basis. That she asked, how dark? Do you mean like this? The current use of this interrogative sentence actually challenges his identity. And for the part of Soyinka, he actually used a lot of declarative sentence, whereby he says, I am African, I hate the wasted journey, and then where the last part where he said West African sepia. Now, the usage of sepia there actually shows that, as you have rightfully said, that Soyinka was actually versed, was actually knowledgeable in the English language, which the woman which is actually the woman's mother tongue, but not that of Soyinka. So when I say there's hybridity there, I'm saying that Soyinka is actually reinforcing his identity. And at the same time, his command of the English language and the English culture has made him to become one like the English person.
So the guy is actually declaring his own superiority over the woman's claim to having the language as her own mother tongue. It's a very deeper issue here that because we claim that this is your language, your mother tongue, and because we claim that you are white, does not in any way make you superior. It does not in any way make me inferior.
So the question becomes, if a man should acquire the linguistic ability far superior than that of Betty, does that not mean that he has become more like Betty?
How does he become one like the nation? In languages, but then that will also be a subjective argument because at the end of the day, Soyinka is still Soyinka. And what has made Soyinka is not just his ability to use English, it's his ability to use his mother tongue. Okay, in fact, in language study, especially in multilingualism or whatever, you cannot master the other language if you have not mastered your own mother tongue.
Sure.
Okay, if you don't have the mastery of your mother tongue, then you can't be a master in the second language. You can't even fully understand it.
Yes.
So Soyinka is Soyinka because he has a mastery of his mother tongue. And now he has acquired a mastery of the English language that this woman is trying to use as a parameter to measure our own superiority over Soyinka. And then Soyinka, when you know the problems of racism, especially the sense of superiority complex that the white have, then you really understand the conflict here in that point. And you understand what Soyinka was how to demonstrate that point. Okay, I think we'll just leave the panel open to general comments on Soyinka. People have read 1 or 2 minutes of Soyinka's work and what I think they want to say. But then I must say that we have this center in the University of Abuja Center for Soyinka Studies that is trying to promote interest in Soyinka Studies. What we have found out among the young people, even among the established scholars, easily to dismiss Soyinka and thoughts and are being inaccessible, and consequently there's a kind of neglect or an attempt to just Soyinka and Soyinka or doing, and then go and find some easier, better way research. So that the center is concerned about we are looking at the interest in Soyinka Studies, and we say that nobody is saying that probably Soyinka is not difficult. They were saying that is what should be made because it holds certain keys to our understanding of the African world, the African literature, especially as produced by Soyinka. Because these are actually what we see as anonymized. There are a lot of anonymized texts, like the telephone conversation, like when we are something that we don't that. Most of Soyinka's works, all of Soyinka's works are works that really most of them are very to leave your theory, deconstruct, so that if we can reconstruct them for our own benefit. So the center is actually trying to start postgraduate studies in Soyinka, master's degree and PhD in Soyinka studies. These have been proposed to the postgraduate school. We hope very soon those programs will be implementation. Then we can have students in center to study Soyinka. And of course, publishing a past was in relation to other writers or emerging writers. How their works influenced by Soyinka, how they depart from Soyinka, or how they are doing Soyinka. So these are things that the center is showing us to happen. And it's one of the reasons why we offer this partner, so that we can also be able to see how we basically can reach out to have their mind be awake to comment on the solution and not just abandon Soyinka or share. Okay. But then I must be sincere with you that it's only in Nigeria that we seem not to really know the value of Soyinka. We go out there abroad. In fact, before we have a center for Soyinka here, we have always centers for Soyinka. So we are also attending everywhere outside the country. But here we seem to just want to abandon Soyinka and use Soyinka somewhere. Okay, I don't know if we. Okay, let's. Okay, sorry, sir. I actually was looking by about the river of this family. There I was listening to thing. So I don't know you to say you might not. No, definitely there is section 3 here, but that's you will see how our section. Okay, sir. Yes, you are trying to balance construction and sciences. I think there are some ways to ask something that's up there. That simply because you're not that's moving on. Understand the comments, understand the ability, maybe the border that we can have in my those things you border, those things that don't go on, it's their position. You fully pass as much as you can, you know that pushes you out to the freezer. It's the idea of stylistic and construction. You said you don't define stylistic that it's dealing with sexual evidence in the industrial. Yes. So, there are creating ways for you to make the two come together. The construction is one style. Style means a lot. If you are not, you do not know that style is everything. You go perfect. In the end, what you do when we focus on style, that is shift over that we do not install living as something that exists naturally, that is not bound to text. That is not bound to benefit. And when we say style, I think that's the problem. Style is not what the government is doing. Style is inherited. Style is so vacant. Style is what's called in Yoruba Asha. That which you select, we found and bind together. So what I'm trying to suggest is that do not separate, try to think creatively. I'm suggesting that try to think creatively to see between I think that in a way that focuses on the text. And the end of the creator, and the last question, for the last part of the different type thought, telephone conversation and condition.
Yes.
You seem to be pushing towards Catholicism. You become mentioned that didn't get that. But that's one way to open up the reason to contemporary thinking. What's the meaning? Neither here nor there. That's the way some asking for our concept. You show me how they are Catholicism before they are Catholicism. This is what I call for the last part of the curriculum. That Soyinka is not ahead of that. And I mean, those words are not ahead of that. Will for the Soyinka work. I think it's not like that. Soyinka said it for the skin. Soyinka actually chose those personas. Let's say that with flesh and blood. But one suggestion is that have a little set that we must study children dimension. We must study achieve the and we must study other organism is now post 2000. Africa will be all and wrong in Africa. And if we reach that something, Africa has always been belong and the world has always been between Africa. And that's when you have an approach to things. The ball is text, which there will be fun studies, and that you support that. That person, the persona is the conversation, continual contact. An African London. Yes. People case of feedback solution. Surgery, I think the characters between how many impact. But that wasn't enough natural. Yeah, 1952. You then just see ZRJIRR, seriously, has no meaning. For example, we from Bodo and then we go the first, you should have that translates. There are the construction and that training, and you also need construction background. But the functional characteristics it is a characters that element of start. So my sister is leaders well within the mission of sentence time. Also look at characters. As the word with reaching your word. I will show that when there is no project without a can about. There is no project without a security need. Takes the Greek, Roman, Roman, Egyptian, the scholar and the Roman sunshine. You know, take the element and stitch them together. Structure, most creatively contribute. Just what I would suggest that when we reach it to the construct is we look for the intertexts. Text that constitute the text development. And that's that's not
Thank you.
just try to master the tricks.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I'm very grateful. Thank you for your contribution. Actually, the point I was making is that it is not able to combine science with construction. It's just because it's not at the end of the day, the construction is the theory of language and more. It's a theory about language because you can't be dealing with science and how we interact with binary opposition and not also be dealing with science and all those things of language and the institution. If we don't become towards journalism and the other, we need more instead of that. But I so much also appreciate something you said now, which is part of why I've been finding it difficult with this, why we really seem to as a cultural development. Because you said now that Soyinka cannibalizes heavy for very no culture that Soyinka has not probably said, so if we have a character like that, how will that person a cultural revival, especially in saying that he's promoting traditional culture? There are a lot of books that I've read, all that solar rule and segregation kind of cultural revival, the same kind of professor. I share your position on that. Your position on that.
Yes. Can you say it's not a balance? Can you say yes, those portion? Because it's beautiful exploration of the African dollars. Thanks. And for me, it's reminding them in the way the conscious member that not be aware of the existence of God. In that sense, when we say if giving information provide ideas or on earth habits of this individual. When you are talking about the boom in government, then, for instance, there is a debt become people do not know that the person with the as a kind of spirit world within the urban environment where he thinks he's working with the 24. So I think it's the way come and say if it's not collecting, it's very advanced. I don't know whether I'm collecting and breaking.
Well, I think the issue is understanding using the for symbolic reasons. Because very kind need for mutual reasons, not to validate it. Okay, so that the most of the meaning that Soyinka has a moral in it's not that he creates those meanings and he creates them to validate that particular way. He's just to use them for symbolic reasons to generate the okay. Even the Ogun that Soyinka celebrates, instead of Soyinka worshiping, Soyinka does not really believe in only God. What I'm it's not really religious like that. Okay, so it's just for symbolic meanings and metaphorical meanings and
So the actual process of definitely by this conformance is in our I think you want to probably I think we can help. Is it you will have any so honestly really found that you that's really it's an avatar. Create avatar of the groups. When the example games you will do the Washington. So who is to mental is a methodologist. Is an engineer. Someone works with strange metals and mix them up. That's what brings back the Washington University. So in terms of the one who was in the bar, who goes to iron foundry to mix things up. Someone who's also human and can somewhat be managed to it. Should is that electrical engineer. So we show you how with sense we are talking using those beautiful avatars. Showing us approach what I generally call contemplative vitalism. It's not it contemplates them. Yeah. If you doesn't it's not handed over to you, trauma and actually there was a case in Chicago several decades ago. One of the production in Australia. That's why called the vote and declared it as a result of the feedback with production by the again, that's the performance part of the transition. But let's go to that theater episode. People are eating the blood of Jesus, so getting the blood of Jesus. So it's having in the church, right? And then it's a theater. So it's not a case of inviting push as well as my region of Australia and Australia to that in the way it presents itself. Is that idea of concentration that the content all of this thing
what does it say? What does it just us remove? Not just what they do. Actually, for those who are interested, maybe to give the idea of if you are welcome, you have let me know. What is the collection of biscuits? That's why I showed up. I'm sorry I was late. On this Friday. The collection of biscuits on showing kind of context. Would you like to parts should be the one let you know share them talk. So also very nice contents. Let me know.
Yes.
That's not to engage. I think I was very helpful. We have to background. We background that background, you pass with the investment, born and bred, you and we develop that. And I think we say we should need to develop, for example, to be at the I think this is where we have not said things about action and development. As someone that has read efforts, operating within the rest of the modernism of the village. If it's not literally to that level, then with the other people, celebrating with the way they celebrate it in the village or anything. When it comes to talent, a kind of someone that knows everything around the village, in terms of poetry, in terms of rights, for him, with the book, that's well for me. It's like a personality. What he knows how to do. That's the one job. So we don't balance all this on this teaching.
Well, first, program will say that the privilege to meet you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure. These have been seeing you online and deleting some of your so I actually I've been looking at the page and was waiting till after the meeting to do and meet you. So it's a pleasure to meet people. But then I think what Paul has said, which is also what I've read to show kind of on is that showing how, as I've said, usually some of these musical characters for spiritual purposes, for metaphoric purposes. It's not as if Soyinka is a giver, quote and unquote, in any of the outside the creativity we engage for outside what we can relate and also on them. And just as Paul has said, Soyinka is concerned about contemplative understanding of these gods and these units. Okay. For instance, now today, how you have argued that in for instance the strong beat, the ritual period, because at the point that the people were supposed to collectively place their force on the knowledge, so you have people there that words dried in their mouths, in their tooth. And that one by one, they have entered the priests. So if at the very center of the ritual success, the ritualists, those who have come for the sacrifice, then abandon the sacrifice and the priests to make the sacrifice. Then how successful is that ritual? So I say that then promoted that ritual? No. In any case, the man did not agree to be a carrier because he sees himself as a carrier. The man agrees to be a carrier because he wants to save the father, who he sees as a helpless human being that is going to be taken against his will. That was the reason why he was agreed to be a carrier. It was not because he had said that he is a carrier. Okay, so there are a lot of big things that we can do to show you can and understand what you can see. So here, the ritual parent. You want to say something?
Yeah, I want to make sure that it's not very started. Not even actually price of that. I want to ask a question. Most of us is where we are the context of this for the question. Most is like the army shall always choose in how we land for the council, not only trying to really assist by the identity. Those and look at
What Soyinka is saying that means that the shieldness, the understanding, the wisdom of Baruka that we want. It's not just tradition that we want. In essence, the tradition here is the knowledge, it's the wisdom. It's not just any other thing. For instance, you take back again to yeah, okay, we are telling. If you go to this place, the swamp dweller, when Israel was questioning Kadili, that Kadili, are you sure that if I make sacrifices again, that the water level is all right? Are you sure that if I make this, in any case, you even ask Kadili, you have been receiving sacrifices on behalf of the serpent, but we have always seen you. We have never at any time seen the serpent. So where is the serpent? And then look, every other person sees the suffering, then you're looking so nice, you see your cheeks, so Soyinka is actually showing that ritual process and the fact that they are making that sacrifice so FDRE for the flood that will continue to come. So how has Soyinka promoted that ritual or that also sacrifice to example?
If you play that play, we walk on the side of the book. Let them do that. That is actually who is not a sheep. Today, around the back of the nation. To go around and say what is happening to us, pray this way, that, then this guy open for this, and 24. This are kind of wicked. The whole thing that we've seen out the science. So that what is trying to face. They're talking about the reliability of
yeah, that's what Robert said. Actually, you can't say that even with God who brings every human, that God is human. But this is the point. Okay, so and it's not like you're not considering it as a body of work, of waste. So, and sincerely, we have been doing a kind of commercial review of Soyinka. We need to read Soyinka and go deeper to understand that Soyinka is in no way cultural revivalist. Soyinka is a writer of the world. The writer of the world. Okay, well, what's the all this discussions about the use of that about the world and around us?
yes.
What is what of you this represents your destiny? Don't forget the leader. Soyinka, what is the leader? Yeah. Look at the bunch, not from the individual, the individual sovereign. It gives the culture, it gives the present, it gives the policies, it gives the individual sovereignty of the individual. I mean, all the Soyinka knows, that the individual sovereign, that's the problem with the man, the telephone conversation. The one telephone from the one person telling the one living. And not see the person as an individual. In the vision, that's the ultimate plan of individualism. That's fine. The enemy and the full rights and the there are people asserting, I am who I am. I am according to the first, and then put a time. That is nothing you can tell me down. That's sovereign, universal sovereign. We're showing that, and that's one thing we also bring to your structure, style, that's not what itself, other character. Who has its own style? But here, they are a child, that's precedence. Watches, these are all style. I'm not going to follow that next style, or that I'm not going to pay, I'm going to get all the times. And I'm not going to carry all the times. I'm going to only my own time. Talking about the individualism and children, when you've been telling that's not going well, and your wife's collection. So you guys are telling us that is deeply not. If you don't go to China, it's exercising the development. So there are many ways to see what they do not just for that. So we do that. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that is what we from the note that we want to appreciate everybody who are a part of this channel. The conversation continues. We are going to have another panel almost immediately, starting by 11. And that panel, how we also be presenting our own paper, and then we have some other people will be presenting. So please, you are also welcome to join us at the panel. Thank you. Okay, please, I also want to appreciate everybody that has joined us online. We are grateful. We hope that you also get time to join us in the next panel. We are always welcome. We appreciate you. And we appreciate you. Thank you very much.